Hi, this is Ken Adams, and welcome to this edition of the Valley View. And this week I'm joined by AP Walther and Helen Caswell, both of the Salem Weekly. And we're going to do kind of a wrap-up show of the best of 2014, according to the Salem Weekly. So welcome to the shows, AP and Helen.
Thanks, Ken.
So, one of the things that I thought we would do was have you talk about what you thought were the most important stories that you covered this last year. So do you have a favorite story or one that you think is really important that the audience should know about, that maybe they didn't catch the first time around?
Well, yeah, there were so many, when I went through our archives to grab issues from this last year to try to come up with, because I knew you were going to ask that question, being that's the topic today. There are so many that we do. I mean, we do 24 issues a year, and on so many different subjects, from drinking holes, to bars, to art, featuring different artists. We have political government pieces. I know you want a specific.
Well, I mean, what you felt like was your main emphasis during the year, but you're talking about what you do on a regular basis, and that's good too, because some people don't always know what Salem Weekly is, so maybe that should be kind of the lead point. Talk about what you're trying to do with the Salem Weekly.
Well, we're trying to expose the community to their
community.
Home. Yeah, I mean, we are underserved from a media standpoint in Salem. We have been for a long time, having a monopoly of the print media, and have few choices for radio and no choices for TV, where other communities like Eugene have their own TV stations and get that reflection on a regular basis. We in Salem don't get stories about each other and our community. There's a lot of great things that other than your
Well, here at CCTV they do provide some community coverage, but
Certainly.
It's not live news coverage every day like you would see from the Portland stations or the Eugene stations.
And I by no means meant to diss the CCTV coverage, because that is one of the regular things that we do have.
Yeah, but it is limited as to what kind of coverage Salem gets in the news, and usually the Portland station is only going to cover us if there's something big politically happening here, or crime.
Crime or fires.
Yeah, and so what is going on in the community here is important for people to know about. And so the Salem Weekly, to me, is one of the places where people can get information about what's happening in their local community.
Yeah, and our tagline on every cover is news, art, and entertainment. And that's basically what we do, news, art, and entertainment. The news side is important because, like I said, there's lack of coverage of that. At least putting it into a story and telling you what's going on. CCTV does a good job of showing all the city council meetings and school board meetings and county. But they're in their entirety. They're a 5-hour, piece that's hard to break down and to and then, of course, our daily paper does a horrible job of covering, these important things that are going on. So we try in our limited resources that we have every 2 weeks to put together a dozen stories that are of importance.
And you've also done some investigative journalism.
Certainly.
And that is something that I don't see too much of in the daily paper that is produced here in Salem. Well, actually, it's not actually produced here in Salem. It's produced in Portland and shipped here.
Yes. Well, it's produced. Yeah, that's a whole other show.
Yes.
But yeah, we do it here, and the research arm is trying to contact and get people to go on the record to talk about the issue. And if it's an issue that's under covered, a lot of times it's because people don't want that story to be told. And so it's hard to get people to talk about it and go on the record and answer questions. Those investigative pieces that you're talking about from a political standpoint, not being served in media, we have dark shadows where a lot of things happen, and people are used to that. Politicians are used to that. Government staff is used to that. Used to not being asked those questions, not having to explain themselves, not have somebody collecting their comment and sharing it with the community. They're used to kind of doing things in quiet and being left alone.
and manipulating what is given to the citizens. And that makes it difficult for citizens to make informed decisions during elections or during policy discussions. Like one of the things that I've talked about a number of times on this show is like the third bridge. And there's a lot of information that just isn't given to the public so that they understand exactly what the issues are. And also I remember one of the stories that really impressed me from the Salem Weekly was the one about the trees on State Street that, basically that was not covered in the Statesman Journal and in any kind of depth about what the issues were and how it came about. But that was something that you broke in your paper.
Well, we did several stories on that, and that's a good example because why didn't the Statesman do a series of stories on that? They did some when the trees went down, but they didn't do the background of what led to the decision. And that's because there were powerful people that were not wanting that story told. And Salem Weekly was retaliated against, by U.S. Bank and by others for telling that story and explaining that. So there's good examples of reasons why it's not always in your best interest, to expose some of these things. It's in the community's best interest, but it's not
Correct.
necessarily in the best interest of the advertisers, say, for instance.
Well, I remember when I used to live in San Jose, California, that they did an investigative report on used and new car sales, some of the gimmicks that people were subjected to buy cars. And immediately the car advertisers in the San Jose Mercury News told them they needed to cut that out or they would not be getting any more revenue from them. And that's a way that they have of influencing what goes in the paper.
Certainly, and that's...
But it was attempted with the Salem Weekly, and you just said, no, we have to do our job.
Yeah, we face that because a lot of the stories that we do are stories that somebody doesn't want to be told. If there's a group of people that are really unhappy with the story and another group of people that are really happy about the story, then we're doing something right because we're starting the conversation about something that is, is of question and there are strong opinions on. And so we look for those pieces too. We're not trying to close the conversation. We're not trying to give all the information and here it is and here's the conclusion and you're done. We're trying to start the conversation. So here's a bunch of information. Here's what this person says. Here's what they did, and
you dig a little bit. And you dig a little bit harder than our local paper does, our daily paper. At least that's been my impression. Helen, do you have any?
Well,
favorites?
I have to give credit to Helen.
Yes, she does a lot of work.
For a lot of the digging work that's done.
So, do you have a favorite story that you really enjoyed producing this year?
Well, I liked very much the story about the teens suing the government for environment. There's atmospheric trust legislation that
they're trying to keep the climate somewhat stable.
Yeah.
for themselves.
Young
and
people all over the United States are suing local governments, including young people suing here in Oregon, because they say that they have a right to a good atmosphere, just like you would have a right to clean water. At least that's what we say. That's our stated right. Clean water, clean air, and also a stable atmosphere. I think that's real exciting. And I'm looking forward to seeing what goes forward with that story.
Well, it's kind of interesting because I know that a lot of times people feel like the younger generation isn't that active, but I don't think that's necessarily true. The young people I've seen can be very active, and I think it's also a product of the fact that during the baby boom there were so many of us that it was hard to ignore. And when you have a smaller population of young people today, they could be the same percentages of people being activists, but it's a lot fewer in number. And I think that's what sometimes leads to that impression. But that's how I see things. So what other stories did you particularly think were important to the community that you covered?
Well, I brought issues here. You probably can't see them online, but I can see them. We are a regular sponsor of the Salem Progressive Film Series, which I know you've interviewed them.
Yes, I have.
And they do a regular show every month in Salem, covering a different issue, and so we have an opportunity to cover that. And some of those have been really exciting and really important, need-to-know type of stories. The getting younger people interested is the blending of the want-to-know with the need-to-know. If it's all need-to-know stuff, it can be really important to you, but dry, boring, hard to swallow, and you don't get a large audience. The want-to-know is sensational and unimportant and
fluff sometimes.
Fluff, entertainment, yeah, or not good for you. And so the blending of that, having a little bit of want with a little bit of need, makes a good story. And so we're always looking for that. And this one was on the Elsinore and their film series. So we do stories about art, film, music, poetry, creative writing.
And you have a lot of information about what's going on, events. You have a large listing of events that are happening for the next couple of weeks.
Half of the paper, half of each issue is dedicated to calendar listings, art, music, theater.
So if people are interested in going out and doing things, the information's right there.
Yep, that's the idea.
And
our current issue that's out right now is the marketing e-cigarettes to children. And this was really timely. We got on this story and started doing it a couple of months ago, but since it's come out, and not because of
the Salem
because
Weekly.
we did it, but several other New York Times just did a big piece on it. It's been in the news a lot. There's some new laws coming in. It's an unregulated industry, the e-cigarettes, and so that was a very timely piece that we did on the cover story of our current issue that's out now.
And one of the things was I believe there was a death actually in New York City of a child from smoking these e-cigarettes, and I think there were some other contributing factors, but I mean it was one of the things that they were kind of concerned about.
Well, and again, this is a good example of us starting the conversation. This is a conversation needs to happen.
Right.
And what are we going to do on a local level? And it's an industry that's growing quite a bit. There's new vapor shops opening up in town in Salem, and we just need to have that discussion. What's appropriate? What regulations are coming down, and what's safe or not?
Well, I noticed during the primary back in May, you covered the city council races very extensively, and one of the things that caught my attention that the daily newspaper wasn't paying attention to was one of the candidates had a history of domestic violence and also a declared bankruptcy. Didn't even mention that at the interview by the daily paper, but you brought that information out and forced them to actually talk about it, at least in some manner.
Yeah, and that became a story because of the statesman's actions of endorsing the candidate, asking him the questions, having him lie to him, and still endorsing him. And so that added to it. It wasn't just that he had the domestic violence in the past. And this is Daniel Benjamin, who won and is going to be our counselor for the next 4 years. But he also, it became a story when, in addition to that, statesman went ahead and endorsed him and basically buried the information or didn't do a follow-up question. And that's newsworthy. Why aren't you asking him this question? So our story was twofold.
Yeah, and that's a question I quite often ask myself when I'm reading that daily paper is there's a lot of times there's not a whole lot of news in the paper, and I'm saying there's things going on. There's council meetings of various kinds going on most nights, and a lot of times there's nothing covered.
Well, there's an incredible need, and it would be so nice to have a large, well-funded media company in town, for-profit, non-profit, whatever, that really told these important stories to us, exposed us to ourselves. They obviously haven't done it. They choose not to do it. We don't have the resources to do the job we'd like to do. And like I said at the opening, there's limited media industry here in Salem. But yeah, wouldn't that be great to have all these stories told and somebody uncovering them and
well, even just to say what they sometimes do it briefly about what the city council is going to have on its agenda and what the importance of those issues are. but they'll announce that they're having a city council meeting, but that's usually about it, and maybe with an item or two about what's on the agenda. And so that's a concern of mine. Plus, usually there isn't information the next day about what happened at the council meeting, because it's just not there.
Not the controversial stuff. Nothing that's gonna that somebody's gonna be
Usually
upset
there's
about.
nothing.
Yeah, well,
I mean, it maybe it's 2 days later they'll have something, but they don't have it the next day. So on Monday, say you read that, oh, they're going to be discussing the third bridge, or they're going to be discussing, cutting down trees or whatever, but then there's nothing on Tuesday about what happened at the city council meeting, and that is a problem. Then okay, so now you're going to Wednesday, and maybe there's something in one of the back pages about what happened at city council, and so people kind of look elsewhere to get their information because they're just not providing it. Yeah.
yeah.
We spent a lot of time covering the property that Salem Hospital owns, and that has trees on it, and
Howard Hall.
from which they want to tear down an old building. That's been a big story this year, as well as money in politics and the 2 elections.
Yeah, that's a great story.
Yeah, and that was really opened up by Citizens United, because now the money just isn't at the top of the political spectrum. It's being filtered down to city council and school board elections as well. And you covered that about where the money was coming from in the city council elections. And I
Yeah,
thought
we
that
did
was an
several pieces on the money.
important part.
Most money spent in the Salem City Council race ever this last time, and quite possibly going to break that again. It seems like it's just more and more every year that gets spent. But you're right, locally this is kind of new to see that trickle down to a city level, at least for Salem.
Right,
we
because
haven't seen that.
being a city council person doesn't involve a whole lot of money.
It doesn't. They're mostly volunteer positions, although
Right.
there, of course, as we know, there's money to be made for friends.
Right. But, it's an amount of money, a huge amount of money that is being spent to be elected for a position that doesn't really pay. And so that's my question. What is the big lure then?
Right.
And some
Special
people,
interest.
I think, yeah, but some people hopefully are on the city council to do the business of the public. And hopefully, by your exposing where the money is coming from, that will help shift the conversation about who is representing us on the city council here at a local level.
Yeah. Well, and this is our usual KMUZ radio show that we do.
Well, that's
each
true.
issue.
We do that.
And following each issue, we do that and talk about the issue. And this time we skipped our Christmas issue for the paper, and so that's why we're here. I thought I'd just mention that because it's...
Well, that's one of the that's nice that you did that, AP. But also one of the things that I found interesting that you have had it's not every issue, but in a lot of your issues, you're talking about trails being built here in Salem or the greater Salem area. And you've kind of made that a special project of showing people where these trails are, who's doing them, who's maintaining them. And I just thought that was a great idea, because a lot of times people aren't aware of them. And so what led you to start covering that issue?
Well, it's,
It was his idea.
recreation is a big opportunity for Salem, for the Mid-Willamette Valley. It's been underdeveloped, just like our media, with the opportunities that we have. We just don't have as many swimming holes. We don't have as many hiking trails in their close vicinity. We obviously have the Cascades, the
True.
wilderness area, and we have the coast. But yeah, between here and the coast, there's only a few trails. There's so much opportunity for that, and there's groups locally that are working on opening up more trail, not only just in the city limits, but just regionally, just outside of that.
Right, so you don't have to drive someplace to go for a pleasant hike or walk, or even, like, I think one of the later issues was even talking about bike trails.
Yeah.
So that you could take your off-road bike, pedal.
And if you want to build a trail, there's plenty of opportunities to build trails too, because the Salem Area Trail Alliance is building trails all the time, almost every weekend, and doing a wonderful job. And that adds so much to our community, both inside city limits and just right next to us, making our area much more pleasant to live in and healthy and things like that.
So you recently, a couple of issues ago, started a new editorial page.
Yes.
And so why did you want to get into that?
Well, very happy about that. We've been doing guest opinions, letters of feedback that we've been printing in the paper for quite a while. But this is a group of really smart people in the community who are putting together and really fleshing out our take on key issues. It seems like the programming that's being done, the opinions that are widely read, are either that just a guest opinion from a different person each time, or we have the Chamber of Commerce, the Statesman Journal doing its regular hitting of opinions, which seem to be, in my opinion, wrong a lot of the time, and just really negative for the community, for people to read that and to think, oh, that's what the majority thinks, or that's that. I'm going to adopt some of that because that sounds about right to me. When, wait a minute, no, they totally missed pointing out this or this, which changes it quite a bit. So to put that information out there and to give people, a little bit more than just the news, and to have it be with a group of community people that basically we bring up the issues, we vote on them, work together on putting it out. We've only had 2 of them. It just started now, so this next year we're ramping up, and we're going to be putting just every issue we're going to be hitting an important subject and explaining what we think about that as a group, and so I'm excied about that. Yeah, it's our editorial board.
Yeah.
And then come next election, which we have to wait now. We weren't organized to be able to do it. That group will be coming out with a series of endorsements leading up to that. So,
well, that's progress for the Salem Weekly then.
It is progress for the Salem community. Yeah.
Okay. One of the other kind of I always kind of read is Brian Hines' Hindsight, and I find him very interesting to read because he's very direct about how he sees things. He doesn't really sugarcoat anything, but that's kind of refreshing. And so I just wanted to mention Brian because I've had him on this show a couple of times because I think he does a very good job of explaining things in terms that people get.
He did a great job with the U.S. bank trees issue that you brought up earlier, doing some of that investigative stuff to uncover what led up to that. And yeah, he's done some great pieces. People love him or hate him, and that's what.
Yeah, there's usually nobody neutral when it comes to Brian.
Yeah. Well, and that's what a good columnist, Strange Up Salem is the name of the column, and that's kind of a difficult concept to understand what that means. It's kind of like keep Austin weird or keep Portland weird, which is an idea of embracing and celebrating the uniqueness in the community and what makes us special, which you don't always see it as that. You see it as strange or different as from a negative connotation. When really strange should be embraced, and that's what we need to do is recognize strange as a positive, unique aspects of Salem. Just going into because a lot of people actually say that, not just what he's talking about, but the name of the column, Strange Up Salem. Mm-hmm. They either get it or it bugs them because they don't understand it. So we get a lot of feedback on the name of that column, actually.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting about Salem because I moved here in 2007, and one of my first experiences was I was out doing some gardening or something, and these 2 teenage girls dressed up as pirates are carrying these big inner tubes down to Mill Creek, and they're going to float down Mill Creek. And I thought,
dressed as pirates.
Dressed as pirates, and I thought, this is a healthy thing. Kids going out, getting in some inner tubes and floating down the creek. I thought, hats off to them. That they felt comfortable enough to do that, and I was really, it is nice to see people doing things that they feel are fun. They kind of get into the moment, and so that was my Strange Up Salem introduction. I guess. Now, what are the stories that you're kind of looking to at for this next year? Ones that you think might be big stories or important stories to the Salem community?
Well, it's hard because we try to be timely with our pieces,
Right.
so it's hard to estimate out.
Yeah.
We're going to continue our recreation coverage of more efforts in the recreation area. Of course, politics and government, the important decisions that are coming up. We're going to be hopefully covering that and doing some hopefully important stories on pieces that people haven't heard about or that aren't really being talked about. We're expanding our writing section. We had a poetry section, which is now
Right.
going to be called Salem Writes, and is broadening out to be other forms of creative writing, not just poetry.
Poetry. Okay.
So that's a thing that's changing. We have a new art editor who's just started, and we're talking about what we're going to be covering going forward this next year. And what are we covering next year? We haven't talked about that.
We haven't talked about it much. I know that we've been working on a story about the Marshallese who are here in Oregon and aren't treated maybe ideally, and these are the people from the Marshall Islands
Yes.
who suffered when bombs were dropped.
And they had to relocate.
And they had to relocate, and they're not.
These are the early atomic explosions that happened.
There were some testing, yeah.
Yeah.
But many of them located in Salem.
Yeah. There's quite a number of them here.
So there's a community.
Yep,
Of,
there is, and so we're working on something regarding them.
oh, okay. And also, I would imagine, you brought this up a little bit last year, is about the siting of the police station, because that'll be, I would think, an important issue coming up as they've put together a more diverse community to investigate where they might put the police station.
Yes, we're working on that. We're working on the composition of the Planning Commission. We're going to continue to talk about the property I mentioned that is owned by Salem Hospital. And we're going to talk about, what else are we going to talk about?
Well, whatever comes up. I mean,
Yes, the news happens on a daily
Downtown
basis.
parking,
it does.
I'm sure.
We have more stories than we can cover. I mean, the way we do it is we have a priority list. We're always adding to as stories come in, and then we discuss them on a regular basis and readjust that priority list. And then when it's time to pull the trigger, we're picking the ones at the top. We are interested in community information, ideas of stories, people that have tips of stories that need to be told. So hopefully those will keep coming in.
Well, and I will mention at this point that during the credits at the end there will be the website, so if people are interested in passing along tips to you, they can do it that way.
Certainly, yeah. Or email. The business card is basically the paper,
Okay.
which is distributed everywhere. So grab a copy of it, and contact information is in there. Let us know what you'd like to have.
We're also still interested in opinions from the community. So if you have an opinion that you'd like to share, we'd be very interested in hearing about that.
Yep.
It's different than the editorial that AP was talking about. It's
A
from
guest
the
opinion.
writers.
Yes.
A guest
your
opinion.
opinion. Yes,
That's right.
Right.
So I want to thank you, AP and Helen, for joining me this
Thank you,
week.
Ken.
And come back next week for Valley View.